And Thomas, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Appreciate it. And thank you for showing up. I know a lot of you. I don't know all of you. So for my first time meeting you, my name is Thomas. And I'm a communications designer like most of you guys are, one way or the other. And I wanted to have some time to talk to you and talk together as a group about something that we've been working on for a little bit called vCons. And what I want to do is just tell you a little bit about where the idea came from. And then I want to talk just a little bit about what a vCon is. Sorry. Now, and if we'll have time for questions, Dan and I actually have been writing software to implement vCons for the last month, maybe. And so we've got real world experience in writing these, so we'd love to talk with you about that as well. So basically, let me tell you where the idea comes from. About a year ago, maybe less than a year ago, I was working on a new communication service that was distributed. And instead of it being a service where everything is working at one spot, it travels around for various reasons. Very much, very Web3-ish in a way, but very, very moving. And so, in the design of that service, one of the things that we quickly found was it's really hard to share the conversations that these devices generate because there's no real standard for defining them and sharing them. And everything that we had done in the past had been either constrained to a single site or device or system. And even though we had done a lot of work on taking away the silos of communications in terms of interconnections and handsets, etc., we really hadn't done any work on removing the silos of data that we collect in our communication systems. And that was the first part for me. And the second part was, and this is also related to the work that I was doing, is really the collection of data that we do in communications is extraordinarily light. It's immature. It's not well defined. Yet, in contrast, just think about how much real information sits inside a conversation. You could, and even in the conversations, there's layers of it. So just imagine that we had this conversation here, you can transcribe it, and that's the information from the conversation. But it's not all the information. It doesn't capture your emotions, doesn't capture the inflections, doesn't capture that human part of it. And then look at the metadata of that. I grew up in a world, in a part of the United States where I could tell you what town you grew up in from your accent. Our accents change literally, per town in my state. And so if you were to go back 50 years and listen to the way I'm talking, you would say, oh, this guy did not grow up in Pawtucket. He did not grow up in Providence. He grew up in Newport. And you would tell that from just the way I talk. And then even more than that, we're only talking about, audio. What about the other forms of real-time communications? So the second part was, we don't do a great job at taking the data, which is very rich, that we get, and using it well. And so those two things together kind of put together in this mind, well, wait a second, how do we actually do this? And so the guy I was working with goes, hey, this is kind of like, like a V card, or, and I said, oh, we should call it a vCon. And that's how the term vCon started. And basically the idea is, and I'll get to this in just a second, that a vCon is a way of data interchange using conversations. And it's a kind of a new idea. And before I get into what I think a vCon is, and how I've come to understand it, and by the way, a few of you here have also helped us understand it. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to read the white paper, I encourage you to. It's a lot of good thoughts and ideas around it. sorry, that this idea of data interchange really has a lot more implications to it. And what really I think limits our particular field is some guys go to voice conferences, some guys go to messaging conferences. There's customer experience guys, there's contact centers guys, there's long distance termination guys, there's asterisk guys, and they don't go to the same places. We don't really think of each other as being in the same micro market. And this is really something which is addressing a larger part of the market, which is we all create conversations on so many different networks and so many different opportunities, but there's no way of interchange between them. So that's really fundamental of how we came to understand what a vCon is. So what I'd like to do next is just to tell you like 3 or 4, actually like 8 different things that really define what a vCon is and why they're there and what they have for us. And so here, let me share my screen, which worked last time. Let's see if it's going to work again. This is audience participation time. The first person who tells me that they can see my screen.
It's there. We can see your screen.
Oh, gets a beer. Good for you. Okay, is that nice and big? Just says, what is a vCon?
Yep.
You all see that, great.
Yep, it's clear.
Okay, great. All right. So again, this is I want to call out in particular, Alan and Dan and Mitch for kicking off the first version, and Eric and Joe and Paul and all the other people who have really contributed to the white paper to make it more fleshed out. And these are the things that we sort of came up with together. So what is a vCon? It's a single real-time conversation. It's a file format that contains and describes a conversation between 2 or more people. It is a WAV file a conversation? No, because it doesn't identify the people who are having the conversation. Is a transcript a vCon? Well, a vCon can hold a transcript, but a vCon is a lot more than a transcript. The thing which was pointed out a few times, and we'll get more to detail in that in a second, is conversations. Some kinds of conversations are inherently difficult to define. But what vCons are for is to contain and that one real-time conversation. And there's a lot of utility to be able to do that, I think, obviously. And I'll just call each one of these points out as we go through. Here's an idea of why having a single real-time conversation is important. Just imagine that you're building a machine learning tool that is learning on how people answer the phone. Well, if you have a series of vCons, a series of single real-time conversations, you have a known test set that you can use to test that machine learning against. Now, I mentioned this in the last part, but I'll say it again. A vCon is also a definition. So one of the trickier parts about trying to understand where we're getting to is, like, what is a single real-time conversation if there's only messaging, right? When does a messaging conversation start? Voice is better with this because, when you have voice, you've got a ringing phone, maybe, and when the phone gets picked up, the conversation starts. When the phone hangs up, the conversation's over. But what is the equivalent for messaging, as an example? When does the message start? Or maybe we've got a customer journey that started in messaging and goes into a voice channel and back into a different messaging channel. How many conversations is that? Is that 1? Is that 3? Well, a vCon allows you to define what you mean. So instead of looking at it and trying to understand how conversations are naturally defined, I don't think that they are, actually. What I think is that conversations need to be defined, and the way that you define a conversation is with a vCon. And so that gets back into the point, well, what is a WAV file a conversation? Well, it's a little bit more than that, because a WAV file doesn't actually define who was involved in the conversation. The people who are attached to that WAV file are just as important as the WAV file. So by taking these portions that can define a conversation, this is what a vCon allows you to do to define it. In like manner, it's also like a computer file format. It's a data interchange standard. It is a thing that you can store, you can look at, you can edit, you can. This is what Dan and I have been doing for the last month. We've been making vCons, two kinds of vCons actually. The vCons that have the URLs for the conversation, and a vCon that packs them, so it's a single file format instead of external references. But that file format is just like what we have with Microsoft, like Microsoft Word is a great example of that. Can you imagine what it would be like today if we weren't able to share documents between each other? And how big is the difference between sharing a document and sharing a conversation? I mean, abstractly, that there is no difference, except we can't do one, we can do the other. So it's a computer file format. We've decided JSON is the right sort of format for it, because vCons can be naturally binary in format. JSONs do pretty well with carrying these mixed media things. And JSON JavaScript is a lingua franca of the web, so it's an easy thing for us to be able to define and promulgate. So this is where the vCon started. Was that it was shareable. And this shareable idea is two-sided, and there's a lot of benefits to making it shareable and a lot of dangers to making it shareable. And I want to talk about that for a second. But just the idea that a vCon or a conversation is a digital asset that you're able to then use as any other digital asset to attach, to analyze, to store, to reference, to compare, makes really is where the vCon started. That enablement of destroying the silos is really what's going to make vCons way more important. And as Eric Berger correctly said, we shouldn't bury the lead with the vCon. The real enabler for vCon are all the tools that can be built to then manage the conversations that are contained in vCons. And when I talk to people about this who are outside telephony, I say, well, it's kind of like PDF, actually. Having a PDF allows you to share a document. And what did PDF enable? All the other infrastructure of PDF tools. And I think that's what's going to happen a lot with vCons. Also, a vCon is lossless. So what I mean by that is a vCon can contain the entirety of the media of the conversation it holds. So a vCon isn't simply a transcript of a WAV file. It could be the WAV file. It could be the HD WAV file. It could be the video file. It could be, whatever Chris Matthews is going to do next in his, virtual world of virtual goggles or meta spaces. The vCon will contain as much information as is related to that conversation, binary or not. And even though it doesn't have to be lossless, you can make a vCon that only has the transcript. vCons also have the ability to contain all of the media that is in that particular conversation. Another thing and this is kind of where I'm kind of interested in it in particular, and this is where STROLID is interested in it in particular. I'm sure a lot of you are kind of wondering, hey, wait a second, why is STROLID caring about vCons? Well, the answer is actually revealed in what we do for a living. STROLID is a contact center in the automotive space, and we handle customers from when they decide they click on a cars.com lead to the moment they get into a showroom to see the car. And in between, our agents have conversations with all these people. And these conversations, we have let's say we have 100,000 conversations a month, more or less. Now, these conversations are real life conversations with real life car buyers who have real opinions and who have real, things to say. Well, Ford Motor Company really wants to hear about that. They really want to understand what their customers are saying for all the right reasons, because they're buying a Ford, not a Hyundai. They picked a truck, not a coupe. They like the two-door. No one likes a gray car, but everyone loves a black car. Oh, my brakes are squealing from coming in. All of that information is metadata. It is information which is the semantics of the conversation which we are having. And the leverage that Ford and any other concern can have about that metadata is that I want to find all the conversations where people are talking about Fords with squeaky brakes, and these are contained in the metadata. And the use for Ford is to feed them into the machine learning algorithms to figure out, okay, can we predict squeaky brakes? Or hey, data analyst, give me the top 10 reasons why people are churning off Hyundais. That metadata, or I call it robot food, is really STROLID's interest. Is why we're doing this work. Because now when we take a conversation, we can say this is what it's about, give it to the people who care about it, such that they can do something with it. This is also, I think, fairly interesting in terms of back when I was talking about how the dangers of sharing. The dangers of sharing is, okay, customer data. Does it go everywhere? How do you figure out what customer data is even in a conversation? Well, the vCon you can. Here's a vCon. Here's a WAV file, and in that WAV file, I can spin it through a tool and says, are there any customer conversations in that WAV file? Did they give your social security number? Is there PII in that conversation? And if there is PII in that conversation, we'll tag it. In that vCon, there's metadata saying PII exists. Or maybe there's another tool down the line that says, take every conversation where it says PII exists, run that vCon through a tool to remove it, de-identify it, mask it, make it demographically correct, but not personally identifiable. All kinds of choices around that. The metadata for the conversation allows all that stuff to happen. They're also tamper-proof. vCon is a digitally signed piece of software. And that piece of software is as much a piece of software as anything. And it is, the fact that it's unique, digitally signed and tamper-proof allows it to be used for high-level important decisions like Ethereum contracts, or for legal cases, or for cases where we are moving conversations between one company and a different company, and we need to verify that it's the same conversations. I have not said the word Bitcoin, blockchain, or NFT once, and I won't again. But the places you can take vCons are probably pretty infinite. Okay, and then vCons are also certifications. As I said before, vCon can contain who had the conversation. Well, how do you define that? Well, the internet and some of the shaking stuff we have done does have a chain of authority. I can tell you that this phone number that resulted in this vCon was signed by T-Mobile, such that I know that the person who made this call was authorized to make it. Who's saying that? T-Mobile. What was the identity? It was that phone number. The same thing with logging into Google Meet. Same thing with OAuth. To be able to leverage the identity infrastructure of who is in this conversation and have that as part of it is available in the vCon, so that you can respond to, what? I want every conversation that I was part of to be deleted. Well, how do you know which conversations you're a part of? Well, if you're in a vCon and you had that authority chain, you would know. So are like the basics of what a vCon is. These are the definitions of it. So I just wanted to go through that with you. And here we go. That was where we came to what vCons are and why. Eric, do you want to stop for questions now, or go to the next topic and questions at the end?
I think it's a good point to take questions, and then you can go through and describe what you've been building. So yeah, anybody got any questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace, as they say.
I put it in the chat, Thomas, in the very beginning when you said it was a conversation between two people. Would that include virtual people as well? You know, if you're getting the transcript of a conversation with a robust bot.
Yeah, no, I would think those are all there, and by people I mean analog people, digital people. Right? The focus really is on capturing the content of that human communication in real time.
Right.
Right. And so, you know, one of the things that we've added to the vCons, which is kind of on the edge of it, is emails, because emails are a real-time communication, however slow they may be, but they in fact are. And so that may be between an autoresponder and a person as well, right? But I would think it'd be fair to say that in every vCon there might be a real person involved on one end, right? I think that would be fairly fair to say.
Yeah, at least one real person has to be involved.
Yeah, at least one real person. Exactly. Yeah. And before we get, I do have some great use cases that we're already using at STROLID. But it really is kind of a game changer to really think about how you know, how these can be used. In fact, I think actually, Aaron, you had a good point that you had in our comments that either you can mention or I can mention around part of the issue of transcriptions and how transcriptions and their maybe it was your, maybe not, but it was around transcriptions and their accuracy. And are we really ready for a world where we have vCons that hold transcriptions that may not necessarily be accurate? And my response is actually, well, vCons are a definition. And so you could take a definition of a WAV file, and now it's a vCon, it's standard, and you can run it through a speech to text and see how well you did. You can score it. You can have 15 vendors, say all 15 vendors, see how you do. And now you can have a feedback loop. And the vCons are the thing which contain the information that allow you to feed the errors back into the tool itself. So,
yeah, it was Joao that was raising that point.
Joao,
yeah.
Do you mean to call you out there? Apologies.
Any other questions at the moment? If not, maybe you want to move on to running through your implementation, Thomas. Or
yeah, Dan, I'll have Dan on mute for a second. If you haven't met Dan before, Dan and I go way back. Dan was the architect what ended up being the first SIP phone system and the first handset back for Pingtel in the mid 90s, which sounds just so far long ago. Dan has helped me define the vCons, and we've been working on our first vCon library. We've kind of called a good enough to it today, at least for internal for STROLID, and we're starting to write the RFC now. So Dan and I will be working on that together. And we've been working on the implementation of it. And there's a few things that we've had to think through and talk about that I want to talk about here with Dan, so we can just tell you about what some of those things are and why we chose one thing and not another. And there's a couple that come to my mind that I want to say. The first is a vCon is good abstractly, but here's a question: where does the media live? Is a vCon contain a pointer to a WAV file, or does it contain the WAV file? Because it could be either. The vCon could hold the URL, or it could contain the actual WAV file. And Dan, what do we decide?
Both. Yeah. Yeah. And then that raises a few problems, right? Is when you do that is, if you sign the vCon and your recording is elsewhere, is it really signed? And so what we have is we have a signature on the media, as well as a signature on the vCon, which contains that signature on the media, right? And to kind of solve that problem. But allows for, if you want to keep your vCon smaller and want to normalize your database, right, and not have to store things in multiple places, then it allows you to reference that, and we'll do that with other things. I mean, the recording is not the only thing that would go into the vCon. We have if you look at this conversation we're having here, right, we've got it's quite reasonable to put this conversation here into a vCon, and we have other things that we may want to include in there. Tom just presented a slide deck, right? And so it would be appropriate to attach that slide deck to the vCon, right, as part of it. And so again, that could be, within the vCon, or we could have a URL where Tom has stored that and shared that slide deck. But that's still it's a very reasonable thing that you would want to include as part of the conversation. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, well, Dan, actually, so Thomas, to go back to your Microsoft Word reference, it's pretty much how Word does it too. I mean, we've all been sent Word files which didn't embed the image or something else, and it was pointed by reference, but it was on a different network and we couldn't access it.
Yeah.
So I think the standard does need to support both, because enterprises will want to have the internal references and general sharing will want to have them embedded or public reference.
That's right. Exactly.
Was my thought.
Yep. And so that was one of our design decisions. We also had to understand, how do we sign it? What exactly? How do we assert or assure that this is a tamper-proof vCon? And we used an existing standard, which was JSON, JSON-P.
The Jose.
Jose, thank you, Jose. And so we can leverage existing standards to provide that same sort of functionality. So Dan and I have been working on, our first libraries, and we do have a couple of great use cases. I'm going to tell you what we're working on right now, which is a kind of fun case. So STROLID is moving its phone system from an old one to a new one. We have 140 agents, and it's not a lot of agents, but it's more than just two people in a room. And we make, again, 100,000 conversations a month. So the question is our new phone system running as well as our old phone system? And how would you actually figure that out? Well, what we've done is we have taken all the conversations and we've put them in. Every conversation we have is recorded, and that recording is now placed in a vCon. Now we have a library of vCons that represents all the conversations our agents have had. Now, in those conversations are the WAV files of the conversation and a transcriptions of both sides of that conversation. So we have one stage where the vCon just has a WAV file. We process that vCon again to add a transcript. And now what we can do with that is ask questions like, is it a short call? Is it a long call? Did only one person speak? Did both people speak? Did someone say goodbye, or did the call just cut off? Is there noise on the call? Do we hear popping? We can measure the volume of every agent and ask, is the volume high enough? Did the volume change? And so what we do is we have a series of AWS Lambdas that continuously look at the vCons for different aspects of it. And when we find one that kind of sucks, we throw it into a Slack channel using the data interchange part of a vCon. The Slack channel grabs a recording file so that we can have a human being say, is there actually a problem with this call? Play it, or only hear one side, etc. But the vCon now gives me a chance to control my vendors. How would I have done this between two vendors in the past? How would I have actually taken enough information from both vendors to compare? No, I can't. No, I can't. And by the way, and so and just the result of that was that we have a GitHub repository that we're filling in with the tools that we're making. We're going in Python first, but we're going to up to JavaScript because some people do that too. And they're publicly available and good for your use. After we have a couple more use cases to talk about, but the next step would be, once you know what we're going to be doing next. And part of it is to make vCons a standard addition to all of the open source projects that we currently use, and to attach them to the CPASs that we like a lot, like Twilio and Bandwidth and MessageBird, and fill in the blanks. And those will all be open source as well. The last use case that I have, and Dan, if you've got one, or Alan, you want to pick one up, there's like a dozen in the white paper, so you can like see them yourself, is if you work in the enterprise or work with an enterprise, your security teams have asked you, okay, what's your PII collection policy, and how do you know you do it right? In conversations, it's really hard. I mean, I always have to kind of say, well, I don't try to. I try not to. I'd rather not. Please don't, right? But only the very largest of the enterprises has access to Verint and Genesis, and those systems that really are able to adequately handle this information, but it's not required. That what a vCon can do is, because it's a standard format, we can write a standard, tool set that will look for PII, flag it, mask it, de-identify it. So now, when we export our vCons to our customers, we export them on different formats. Okay, you want a vCon? Do you want it full up? Do you want it masked? Do you want it de-identified? Do you want us to take the WAV file, transcribe it, then play it back with Bart Simpson's voice? We can do that. So that's the second one, which I think is really important, like for us. Dan or Alan, those must be your favorites. Any others that you think are really like cool stuff, or is it back to the white paper?
Oh, sorry, it took me a bit to get to the right screen there. Yeah, I've got. I don't know how you want to structure it, Thomas. We need to make sure we have the ask. I have a couple of slides that go through some analogies to what vCons can do, and then quickly run through the timeline. It's up to you how you want to structure. Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay. So let me just quickly share my screen now. Just hang on a sec. I'm going to do it as a Chrome tab because it's the only way I can ensure that it works reliably. There you go. So hopefully everybody can see the screen. Yes? No?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yes.
So we have the. What I'm going to run through is just a few use cases. Thomas did a great job running through some of the important ones. I'm going to look at analogies to other open standards that have had a massive impact on industries. Look at strategic importance and plans. What are we trying to do? Where are we going with this for the rest of this year? So just cribbing the words that Thomas has used, vCon enables you to do more because there's an ecosystem. Thomas is publishing some of the tools that he's using for his vCon. And because it's an open standard, you can use them too. So no longer are you having to reinvent so many tools or build them yourselves. You can take advantage of other people who've done it for you for less because it's open. You're not trapped within a particular vendor, and faster. Back to robot food, enabling you to take all your conversation data and to be able to pump it through organizations that live or die by their success in understanding conversations, rather than, hey, we've sold this UCAS, CPAS platform. Our job is done now. Oh, yeah, here's our AI. It's companies that live or die by the success of their machine learning. So just quickly on some use cases, Thomas did a great one here, service provider migration, because you own your conversation data. And it doesn't even mean changing between different UCaaS platforms or CSaaS platforms. It can be between different versions of the same contact center provider. It could be you're moving from an on-prem or within your data center to a cloud-based, and that can cause a whole host of headaches. So again, having a standard format enables the conversations to be sucked out of one system and pumped into the other. This use case came up many times in talking with people about the idea of vCon. It's just the challenge of working with bots. You start by putting some of the conversations into Word. You then realize you need to manage that data, so you move to Excel. Then you realize you need to manipulate that data, so then you build your own JSON. Then you start building your own macros, and then you've got all the headaches of realizing this isn't the business I was trying to do. Again, Thomas has already made reference to this. I think it's one many people have talked about. Then we've got, again, Thomas mentioned the speech recognition test set. So you can do a quantified comparison using your own data at scale. Independent tests are independent tests. You've got your conversations with your accents, with the it could be 3G phones calling into your data center, may not have any high quality or high definition voice going in, and you want to look at how those different tools compare, and enables you to use your own data. Thomas has covered PII compliance. Again, there is a certain risk we're running at the moment in the industry where we go, well, the tools we have don't deal with voice and video. Well, they do, they can, and there's increasing pressure to look at compliance across data that we've said we can't access. So I think that's important in enabling that to be done with the same tools. So your PII tools can be extended to this other data. Conversation analytics, you'll see in the white paper, whole range of use cases around that. Having apps built that just focus on singular problems. Theta Lake is a great example. They have to work with some of the big collaboration platforms to deal with, for example, PII compliance. Now, you can have one that I see across so many of the companies I work with is we're still, like the basics of when you get a meeting together and then, actions are discussed or agreed, and then by the next meeting, they don't happen. Well, having a meeting minder app that just lists out all the actions, puts those actions, automated into, a tool that enables people to be held accountable. And it's available across not just the top 5 collab platforms, because it takes time and effort to be able to get your app working on WebEx or Teams. By having vCons, you open up to all potentially, all the small, medium collaboration platforms to, have your app working there. This already exists in the market, verbal agreements, but with a vCon, you can make it far easier to get it into writing and have that, have a feel for the quality of that transcription. As Thomas mentioned at the start, and this is a very important point, we're bringing together people from many different parts of the sort of programmable communications ecosystem. It's not just contact center, it's UC, so it's not just customer conversations, it could be a whole range of other conversations that are happening. But back to Thomas's point, include important insights on how people are using your product or competitors that they think are to your product, and you can bring those insights in, again, by having vCon across all conversations that are taking place, across authenticating, certifying conversations. That's a carrier opportunity. And what I'd ask is please add in other use cases you think that are important. I mean, everybody's helped us in putting this white paper together. We're hoping by the end of the month to have this sort of released for general audience. But if you think we're missing anything, if you think there's stuff that's weak in there, please let us know. We're working together on this. Moving on to analogies. As always, nothing's new under the sun. So here, shipping containers, creating an open standard for how you exchange goods. Global trade is now 60% of global GDP. Back in 67, a very important date. For some of us in the room, it was only 22% of global trade. And a whole ecosystem has appeared in taking that container and then disassembling it and making it available, the contents of, I should say, to everybody wanting to basically import, export around the world. SMS. Once upon a time, it only worked with your carrier. Once it became inter-carrier, then the whole business exploded from billion to 30 billion messages in just 5 years. And of course, now we've got multi-billion-dollar industries based around A2P SMS. Now, one that's been for me, very important, and we've had open banking presentations at TAD Summit because I feel they've led where, as an industry, I think there's a lot of opportunity in copying their lead in programmable comms, is they've enabled consumers and small, medium enterprise to share their bank credit card transactions securely with third parties. And then they're able to provide application services on top of that. Simple one. Enables people who are trying to save for a goal to share their information, share the goals that they're trying to achieve, and then to be able to get guidance on how to achieve those goals. It's a simple thing, but it's amazing. Updraft was a simple example that was presented actually at TAD Summit back in, I think, 2019. An app that looks at your transactions, your credit cards, what you're doing on your bank, and then makes recommendations on how you can consolidate debt. And today, there are over 5 million people in the UK using open banking services 4 years after its launch. It's had a major revolution, again, through enabling the open exchange of banking and credit card information. In the programmable comms market, of course, once telecoms got exposed through APIs, we've seen an explosion. Billion-dollar businesses have been created simply by enabling telecoms to be done faster, cheaper, better. With vCons, it now enables a similar explosion around conversations. Now, of course, some of the questions I get asked is, well, how big's the market, with vCons? Well, vCon is just an interface. It's a small but important enabler. And I think, in the enterprise within employee conversations can do one hell of a lot. But just to say, just to take one number that's out there, we've got the global customer analytics market. It was 5 billion in 2020, projected to be 21 billion by 2028. When we look at the data that gets input into the customer analytics market, potentially over half of it is addressable to vCon. So some of that growth will be directly relevant to vCon. So that's just to give you some analogies, to give you a little bit more on the use cases, then onto the plans. So please contribute to the open source project. So Thomas is going to be building adapters. There's no reason why you can't be building adapters for your favorite CPaaS, UCaaS, contact centers, programmable comms apps, analytics engines, machine learning platforms. So standard is being defined. We hope to publish the vCon white paper at the end of June to get broader awareness across the industry. Thomas and Dan have already mentioned the standardization effort. Having more than just Thomas and Dan there driving this is essential. So please support Thomas and Dan as they move this through the standardization body. We need to show that this is an industry movement. And then, given all that we're going to be doing over the summer, we're hoping in TAD Summit in 8th and 9th of November, we're going to be having a vCon workshop there. Now, it'll be in Alvero. That's the Venice of Portugal. So a really nice place in November when the temperature is still in the 20s. So it'll remind you if you manage to make it physically there to what summer used to be, where we'll share the latest on the project, share implementation and deployment experience. So that's the plan over the summer. You'll see on the white paper in one of the appendix, we have a list of people involved. And please get in there, add your names, and we need to show as many people as possible involved in this to get industry attention. Because I'll be frank with you, what we're doing here, most of the big guys go, yeah, for us, we're happy, we're big, we're fat, we're happy. Having this interface makes it easier for customers to churn off us. So what's important is for all the small and medium providers in this industry to get involved, to make it real, so that we can get a big enough segment of the market to make stuff happen. So that's my piece. And hopefully the ask is clear there. And please get involved. Please promote what we're doing. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Oh, Felipe, he says, actually, please bring a jacket when you go to Alvaro. It might be chilly at night.
Take it from someone who lived there for 5 years.
It's all relative. Felipe complains too much about cold weather.
I'm from the south, so it makes sense.
No, that's a good point, actually. Thank you. Okay, so now it's just open discussion. Any other points, any questions, any concerns, please raise them. Yes. Oh, yeah. Go for it. Go for it, Dom.
Yeah, I think the proposal is interesting, but I guess speaking of concern, I think it may be trying to address too many things at once. And so it might become difficult to build the kind of momentum that would be needed for actual standardization. And I should say I come from the FCC, so we spend quite a bit of time trying to get people to agree together on standards. But I guess that just to say that we are at the start of one of those conversations rather than at the end of it. I see there was some discussion in the white paper about bringing this to IETF with some comments on whether, if it's a file format, whether it should be OASIS or FCC. I just wanted also to mention that if the FCC feels like an interesting place, I'd be more than happy to give some guidance on how you could make that happen there. In particular, I think one thing the FCC could help with is the IPR aspects. I know you all mean to make this fully open, but there is a difference between wanting and enforcing it. So again, I'm happy to help. I do agree that there is quite a bit of potential there. I think starting with use cases and building from there is a great way to get you all or get us all to the right place.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dom. Do we have anybody else wants to speak? Oh, Dan's got to go.